It's a risky move to attempt to draw the portraits of well-known people, especially when you show the references you're drawing from as well. And yet, here I am, doing it anyway. This spread I want to draw is a visual arts love letter to black women, with a special focus on those who have dared to challenge how women are allowed to move and operate in this world. What women are allowed to want, how they are allowed to present themselves, and what they are allowed to demand. My medium, coloured pencils. The subjects are going to be hard enough. I want to keep the medium as simple as possible. Simple, but interesting. A trick that I like to do while I'm still working on seeing values in my references is to download the reference picture, transform it to black and white, and then increase the contrast. Now the values are clear and we have, once again, simplified the process. I also really struggle with spacing when I create spreads, so we're going to simplify that too and just map out lightly where I want everyone to go. But, spoiler alert, I still struggle with the spacing. This helps, but it's still an issue that I have to deal with. It is an ambitious project, sure. I'm trying to complete 7 sketches here of well-known influential black women, so let's see how we do. Let's begin with everybody's favourite First Lady, the myth, the legend, the one and only Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama. You know how they say you don't know what you've got until it's gone? I feel that way about Michelle being First Lady. I took for granted that the First Lady would be intelligent, vivacious, articulate, kind. There was a lot about the Obamas and their administration that I took for granted, and in my defense, it's probably because I didn't actually live in the US at the time. And despite being one of the most educated and professionally successful First Ladies ever, as well as being a Christian woman, fantastic, hands-on, very present mother, Michelle received some of the most vitriol and admonishment and downright discrimination than any other First Lady. The Obamas spent 8 years in the White House without a single scandal. It's crazy that that's the bar. I guess the bar really is set in hell now, but they not only met that bar, they far exceeded it. If you can't already tell, I'm a fangirl. I read Becoming as soon as it was released. By read, I mean listen to the audiobook. I loved it because she is such a great storyteller, and it was great to hear the events in her own voice, told in her own style. But I was also so happy to get a physical copy and see the accompanying photos. I just recently watched Becoming on Netflix. I didn't even know it existed until recently, and I highly recommend it. It was an educational and inspiring watch that reminded me of the sense of hope and possibility the Obamas brought into the White House. And even though I'm watching it years after its release, this is such a great time to watch something like that and be inspired again. Because, yeah, watching the documentary really allowed me to believe in that kind of hope again. If there's anyone who understands how to be a pioneering First Lady like Michelle, it's Winnie Mandela. I'm sure you've heard the adage that behind every great man is a great woman, but I think it's more a case of right next to every great man, holding things down at home and abroad so he can be the face of the movement, is a great woman. I said that Winnie understood the pressure Michelle felt as a First Lady, but of course Winnie came first. She was the pioneer and she set the standard. Nomzamo Winifred Zangiwe Madikizela Mandela was a politician and anti-apartheid politician in her own right. She was a member of the ANC party, served as a member of parliament for many years, and was the Minister of Arts and Culture for a time. In many ways, Winnie Mandela is a controversial figure. She was not perfect by any means, and I look at her life through the lens of Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Winnie was born to a Xhosa royal family. Her maternal grandfather was white and her maternal grandmother was Xhosa, at a time when this type of pairing was illegal. I couldn't find much on this grandfather, but I can't help but wonder what the circumstances surrounding this union were. She was married to Nelson Mandela for 38 years, but for 27 years of that marriage, Nelson was imprisoned on Robben Island. While he was imprisoned, she became the face of the anti-apartheid movement, picking up the mantle he had been forced to drop. As you can imagine, that level of visibility came with its consequences. She was tortured, beaten, imprisoned, exiled, put into solitary confinement. She developed back problems from her torture, which led to a dependency on pain medications and alcohol. And she herself admitted that her 491 days imprisoned by the National Party government changed her. In fact, I believe she said it hardened her. The things she did during her banishment to rural South Africa can be described as unseemly at best. Violence begets violence, and unfortunately the violence she saw and experienced was then perpetrated by her own hands. She was held accountable, and she did have to answer for her actions, and it is undeniable that she was an integral part to the anti-apartheid movement. In fact, research has shown that having a more extreme cell in any movement actually makes people more open to hear the more reasonable requests of the main movement, which we've actually seen play out in different civil rights movements across the world and history. And to this day, Winnie is still known to her supporters as the mother of the nation. Now, if we're talking mothers, we have to talk about Chief Funmilayo and Nikulapalo Kuti, formerly Funmilayo Ransom Kuti. She dropped the anglicised Ransom and began using her Yoruba name as a rejection of colonialism. If you haven't heard of Funmilayo, then you may have heard of her son, Fela Kuti. He is one of Nigeria's biggest musicians and the innovator of the Afrobeat genre, where West African beats are blended with Western American music. In his time, it was jazz. In our time, it's rap, hip-hop, you name it. And if you haven't heard of either of them, then I'm glad I've introduced you to them. Funmilayo was a Nigerian educator, political campaigner, and a women's rights activist, not just in Nigeria, but throughout Africa and the world. Her father worked in palm produce, goods produced from the Nigerian palm tree, and her mother was a dressmaker. Unlike many of their contemporaries, her parents believed it was important to educate their daughters as well as their sons, and when the local grammar school began accepting girls, Funmilayo was among the first 6 enrolled. There was a trend on social media where people make a video with the text or caption, "What radicalized you?" And for the most part, these were funny videos, but in Funmilayo's case, I think that if she made this video, she would probably put her years furthering her studies at Wincham Hall School for Girls in England. Because when she attended that school, she went by her Christian name of Francis, but when she returned to Nigeria, she dropped the Francis and was henceforth known by her Yoruba name, Funmilayo. So whatever happened there made her want to fully reject colonialism. She worked as a teacher for many years, but when she got married, she quit her job as a teacher and dedicated her time creating preschool classes in Nigeria, organising clubs for self-improvement in young women, and teaching illiterate women to read and write. Funmilayo was a pioneer. She was the first woman in her city to drive a car. She also understood how to use her privilege to uplift others. Through her literacy club, Funmilayo began to learn more about the women who worked at the market carrying their children on their backs, and she saw that her privileged middle-class background was not a true gauge by which to measure the plight of the Nigerian woman. So she formed a women's union and fought against unfair government taxes and product seizures that harmed these marketplace women and their enterprises. She even took to wearing her traditional Yoruba clothing and speaking Yoruba at meetings to unify the women and avoid class conflict, because of course the lower class women did not go to school and did not learn English, whereas Yoruba was the language of the state. Funmilayo eventually formed the Nigerian Women's Union and would travel around the world speaking at events and advocating for women's rights. Her legacy goes beyond women's rights. She was a big part in the fight for Nigerian independence and spoke out against subsequent corrupt Nigerian governments, which likely led to her untimely death during a government raid of her home. She is the reason men in power don't want women to be educated. They know we will hold them to account and change the world. And while we're talking about famous families and educated women, let me introduce my next subject, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. I knew Meghan, maiden name Markle, from Suits. Now listen, I'm English. Anticipating the woman Prince Harry was finally going to settle down with was a national pastime. He was the bad boy prince, the one who defied convention. He was embroiled in his fair share of scandals, including some that probably led to some difficult conversations with his wife and will likely lead to some difficult conversations with his kids. But he remained beloved by the British public. Now, before we go much further, let me make it very clear. I am Team Harry and Meghan. I think the institution and the public underestimated both of them in many ways. I don't think they knew Meghan was as educated as she is, as active a participant in politics, or as good at public speaking and endearing people to her. This is a woman who did her bachelor's at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, did an internship with the American Embassy at Buenos Aires, speaks fluent Spanish, and was in the cast of a successful American TV show, as well as launching several successful projects on the side. She is and was an asset to the British royal family, and they did her a real disservice. But at the same time, that family is mired in controversy and immorality, so in my opinion, it was a lucky escape for her. Do I think she and Harry should have just taken it on the chin, kept quiet and carried on? No. Because the truth is they did, for a time. They kept quiet until it was too much. And not only were they affected by it, but they could see the repercussions it was already having on their children. And listen, the British tabloids are brutal, and that is a thing. And so many people, regardless of race or culture or class, have been dragged through the mud by the British tabloids. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that we should keep allowing it. I think it is time to stand up and say enough is enough. This is horrible. People should not be receiving death threats or becoming villains just for trying to live their lives, honestly. Because we tell our children not to be bullies and not to condone bullying, but then suddenly when it's enacted by people in power, we're like, oh, it's fine. That doesn't make any sense to me. Disney is going through this rebrand where the movies are less about princes saving princesses and more about princesses being empowered to save themselves, yada yada yada. And Meghan's story is kind of the embodiment of this new kind of fairy tale. She was a quote-unquote commoner, swept up and saved by the prince. But when she discovered the fairy tale was actually a nightmare, she was empowered enough to take her family and leave. You could even argue, and I do argue, that she in fact saved the prince. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, they could never make me hate her. We can't discuss black people in the higher echelons of British society without mentioning Diana Abbott. Diana Abbott is the first black woman to be elected to the UK Parliament, and in 2024 she became the longest reigning female member and gained the title Mother of the House. So in a way, she is the mother. Abbott is also a bit of a controversial figure. It seems to me that her controversy stems more from her speaking a truth that many of her colleagues are uncomfortable with acknowledging. She spent most of her career with the Labour Party and has always been very vocal on issues of discrimination and race, which has sometimes won her favour and often not. In 2023, she was suspended from the Labour Party when she dared suggest that black and brown people in the UK face a different and more aggressive form of racism than immigrants from Eastern European countries. Her suspension was lifted following much support and advocacy of the public and influential black British celebrities. But when she stood by her statements in 2025 and said, "Did I stutter?" she was suspended again. So she does remain in Parliament, but as an independent. And honestly, it does seem a bit like Starmer has a bit of a vendetta against her. I cannot overstate the impact and importance of Abbott's tenure in Parliament. To be a second-generation black woman, not for money, but a hard worker who has spoken up about issues of race in England and yet still remains in Parliament is pretty extraordinary. You see, Britain doesn't like to talk about race. Racism is an issue other countries have, according to the Brits. But Abbott has not allowed this to be the lasting narrative, because when you are a black or brown person living in Britain, it's not just a problem that other people have. She was even targeted by the London Metropolitan Police's undercover unit for her work in racial justice. Does that sound familiar? Why is race such a chokehold for majority white countries? I don't know if I was getting tired or more efficient, but the portrait started to take less time and feel simpler by this point. So let's just say I was finding my groove. But speaking of black women in high-powered governmental positions, it would be remiss to not draw our very own Vice President and presidential nominee, Kamala Harris. Kamala, like Pamela Harris, the first female vice president, the first black vice president, and the first Asian American vice president. You don't get more trailblazing than that. Except to be the first female and Asian American president. Now that would have been amazing. Harris graduated from Howard University and earned her law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. She began her career as a prosecutor in Alameda County and later became District Attorney of San Francisco before being elected Attorney General of California, for which she was the first woman and the first black person to hold that role. So she is just committed to blazing the trail, pretty much. She then served as a Californian senator to the US before being elected vice president alongside President Joe Biden in 2020. And of course, she is an Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority member, which is part of the Divine Nine historically black sororities and fraternities. She is a very well-educated, extremely accomplished woman, and she made a fine vice president and would have made a great president. 92% of us thought so. But it seems the United States is not ready for a female president, no matter how qualified she is. Meanwhile, in Africa, there have been 24 female heads of states, and the pioneer was one Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Sirleaf was president of Liberia from 2006 to 2018, and she guided the country's recovery after not one, but two civil wars. Her administration focused on rebuilding democratic institutions, stabilizing the economy, restoring international partnerships, and expanding access to education and healthcare. Sirleaf championed women's political participation and worked to strengthen human rights protections in Liberia. She also supported initiatives to empower girls through education, combat gender-based violence, and promote women's leadership in peace building and governance. Because when women are educated, we share that education, we pass it on, and we empower others. For her role in advancing women's rights and nonviolent peace efforts, she was awarded the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize alongside other people. Since her tenure as president has ended, Sirleaf has continued to be very involved in advocating for democracy, anti-corruption, gender equality, and leadership initiatives. She is still a very prominent voice for justice and women's empowerment across Africa and the world. And there they are, my 7 influential women in modern black history. Some of the portraits were more successful than others. Like I said, Michelle suffered from being the first. It's Michelle adjacent, but not quite Michelle. Others were a little more successful, but this is all still a work in progress. I'm still learning. I'm still improving with each time I pick up a pen or pencil or coloured pencil. I had a lot of fun drawing these and reminding myself of how great black women are, which gives me hope for the future in what feels like a very dark world. If you did enjoy this, then make sure to like and subscribe and let me know which portrait you like the most in the comments below. And thank you again for watching. Goodbye.